first. So now, Scott and I are very pleased to turn it over to Brittany Cudzillo, the Galactosemia Foundation's Vice President, to give some closing remarks before Scott wraps us up. Brittany.
Hey, everyone. Thank you to Debbie and Scott for moderating such a wonderful discussion that we've had over the last 4 hours. It's been incredible to be a part of this. Thank you to the FDA for valuing our voices in this community. We're so glad to have been able to do this with you. Thank you to the panelists for your vulnerability and your courage and being willing to share your stories, and to the community members who have aided in discussion and polling. It's been great to hear everyone. I have the distinguished honor of trying to take all 4 hours we've been together and summarizing that in 10 to 15 minutes. The meeting was opened by Peter Saltonstall, the president and CEO of NORD, followed by a welcome by Nicole Casal, our president of the Galactosemia Foundation. A clinical overview was presented by Judith Ferdovich-Kyle, our PhD professor in the Department of Human Genetics at Emory University School of Medicine. She shared that galactosemia is a rare disease caused by an inborn error of metabolism, genetically passed down through 2 mutated autosomal recessive genes, causing a profound deficiency of the GALT gene responsible for breaking down the sugar galactose. Without the GALT gene, galactose is converted into the chemical biomarkers of galactose-1-phosphate, galactitol, and galactonate. The incidence of galactosemia in the United States is about 1 in 50,000 births, being about 80 babies a year, about 3,000 people in the United States living with it currently, with a slightly higher incidence in the white ethnic group and a much higher incidence in children due to the newborn screen saving infant lives. In infancy, galactosemia becomes a metabolic crisis, but once the diagnosis is made and safe formula is given to the infant, you typically see them heal from those initial complications. This, however, does not stop the disorder from leading to long-term complications. The long-term outcomes for patients with galactosemia are variable, as we've talked about today. However, we're able to deduct with certainty that the current treatment plan of dietary restrictions saves an infant's life in the short term, but does not prevent lifelong complications from the disorder. Many children and adults with galactosemia suffer from cognitive delays, speech and language difficulties, neurological problems, socio-emotional difficulties, low bone mineral density, and pre-ovarian insufficiency in female patients. Dr. Judy's medical presentation was followed with a presentation from Dr. Sheila Farrell, who is a pediatrician and a reviewer in the Division of Rare Diseases and Medical Genetics at the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. Dr. Farrell shared that PFDD meetings are valuable to the FDA to learn from the experts, people living with galactosemia and their care partners to help facilitate treatment development, design clinical trials, and review new drugs for galactosemia. We then started the patient experience of our time together with panel 1 talking about health effects and daily impacts of galactosemia. DJ shared his hope for a medical treatment of galactosemia and the apraxia it has caused in his life. Jillian shared the hardship her daughter Penelope has had with galactosemia, including infant metabolic crisis, gut issues from E. coli sepsis in infancy, frequent seizures, sensory processing disorder, significant hand tremors, and constant regressions of speech and motor skills. She also highlighted the frustration and coordination of care and the danger of prescription drug use with unsafe ingredients. Elaine shared her story of infant loss with 2 of her children and the effects galactosemia has had on her son Jerry, who was saved in infancy after being in a coma but has suffered long-term complications such as mentally disabled, bullied, seizures, having a hard time verbalizing his needs and wants, and the struggle with any kind of change. Jerry has not been able to live independently and currently lives with his sister, who helps coordinate his care and handles his finances. Cassidy shared that her daughter Alina's diagnosis in infancy. Since then, she has struggled with slow processing speed that causes her to struggle socially, physically, and educationally. Alina lives frustrated by her constant need to catch up and feels left behind by her peers. She also shared that there have been financial struggles to keep up with doctor's visits, therapies, and tutors. Cassidy highlighted how she feels ill-equipped to care for her daughter and they are desperate for more treatment. Natalie was next, and she is a mother of 2 children with classic galactosemia. She shared how her son, Jacob, has lived with speech struggles, cerebral palsy, behavioral delays, and seizures since his near-death experience as an infant. Her daughter, Anna, who was placed on a galactosemia safe diet from birth, has lived with speech delays, ADD, learning delays in math, and has been on hormone replacement therapy due to pre-ovarian insufficiency. She also shared the hardship of dietary restriction that can be caused in many settings outside the home, being afraid there will be nothing safe to eat. Maureen was last in this panel. She struggled with she shared her struggles, as an individual with galactosemia, socially and physically, specifically with dietary restriction, hardships in learning at school, lifelong math challenges, and her struggle with pre-ovarian insufficiency, which has led to the inability to have biological children. We had a robust discussion on panel 1 when we opened up to everyone here. We heard from a lot of community members about the hardship in controlling seizures, learning disabilities that seem to be caused by slow processing speed and memory problems. Pre-ovarian insufficiency was brought up, and the heartache of not being able to have biological children. The stress of insurance coverage for medications that control symptoms such as anxiety and seizures. Social anxiety and the struggle to navigate meeting new people and keeping up with conversation among peers. Muscle weakness that affects hand-eye coordination. Dental concerns with weak enamel, and how all of this continues into adulthood, making living independently a challenge or not an option at all. In our afternoon session, we talked about perspectives on galactosemia treatments. Amber shared her son's management of galactosemia includes his team of doctors, such as the metabolic specialist, an ophthalmologist, and neuropsychologist. He has an individualized education plan for his tremors and learning delays and has been enrolled in physical, speech, and occupational therapy. Holden has been participating in a clinical trial for galactosemia and has seen improvement in his learning delays and tremors since starting that trial. Tiffany shared her daughter receives speech therapy for her language delays, occupational therapy for her fine motor skill delays, and special education for her learning struggles, yet she still continues to fall behind her peers with her neurological damage continuing to progress. Charlotte has been participating in a clinical trial. They have been part of a natural history study, and Tiffany expressed her desire to see a treatment, even if it means being in a hard clinical trial, as long as that is a safe treatment. Heather has 3 children with classic galactosemia and focused on sharing about her son Garrett, who was diagnosed via amniocentesis and has always been on a safe diet. From early in life, he has been in speech and physical therapy, and as he grew older, he needed more intense speech and behavioral therapy along with special education services. Garrett started having seizures in 3rd grade and will be on medication to control them for the remainder of his life. Garrett has been in a natural history study and a clinical trial. Tara and Joey then shared that although Joey has been on a safe diet since day 3 of his life, he has suffered many neurological complications from galactosemia and has been in speech, physical, occupational therapy, and is currently in a one-on-one education setting. He is impacted daily by galactosemia, and they are committed to long-term studies to change the future of galactosemia for Joey and for all future patients of this rare disease. Lastly, Amy shared her son, who is currently in 1st grade, has struggled with learning, processing speed, and behavioral issues that has caused their family to seek out investigational treatment options. He has been in speech and occupational therapy, with growth being slow and frustrating. Amy has concerns about her son living independently in the future and is committed to studies that could bring about more treatment options. Amy has expressed concerns about the length of time a trial must stay in the placebo arm, wanting as many people to have access to experimental treatments as possible. Key points from our discussion as a whole community. We saw that in our discussion, there was a lot of talk about types of medication and treatment that we've been using in our daily life for the treatment of galactosemia. We heard about how anxiety and depression medicines are used, but don't seem to completely help the symptoms and also seem to cause their own set of issues. Many take sleep supplements, probiotics, and Miralax, which are used into adulthood to help with severe life-altering constipation, which we've heard a lot about. And many take supplements in vitamin D and calcium for bone health. Many of our community members involved in this meeting have highlighted the use of speech, feeding, occupational, and motor therapies to help alleviate some of the severe symptoms that galactosemia causes, such as apraxia and speech and motor skills. The financial hardships have been talked about, including paying for pharmaceuticals, therapies, and tutoring, and how burdensome that can be for families. The underlying theme during this discussion really was focused around how hard those with galactosemia work to learn, communicate, and understand their peers without seeing very many gains, all the while feeling exhausted and overwhelmed. Pharmaceuticals and therapies have seemed to help with those struggles, but they're not enough. Most families who spoke talked about early intervention, yet are still struggling to help their children learn and thrive. Most families are exhausted and quality of life is affected when therapy is so frequent that there is no time or energy for anything else. Many also expressed feeling like there is no endpoint, and during polling, it was shown that putting all the treatments available together, they still only somewhat to very little feel like they are treating the symptoms of galactosemia. So overall, we have heard about the tremendous unmet need in galactosemia in our entire community. Each of the major symptoms I've summarized here have incredible quality of life impacts. Treatments are mostly targeted towards symptoms, and there are no FDA-approved treatments for galactosemia. Treatments can be helpful, but most do not really treat the underlying cause or stop the progression of galactosemia. Research and development in this area is desperately needed. And now to close the meeting, back to you, Scott Saylor, our meeting co-moderator.